So statistically speaking, the planet is a dumpster fire. And most of us are standing in front of it with a spray bottle of room temperature water, wondering why we're still feeling anxious. We all kind of treat climate change like a feeling. And feelings don't scale. They loop and they expand and eventually they paralyze. Because you're faced with a crisis. It is so vast, it has no boundaries, no job description and no done definition. There's just this nagging feeling that you should be doing everything all at once and forever. And that just seems to be our current lifestyle. But this is also a recipe for breakdown. But there is actually a discipline specifically built for high-stakes, chaotic nonsense, where the stakes are too high to fail. And that is project management. Among other things, we use it to launch satellites and build skyscrapers, meaning systems that are so complex that no single human can actually grasp them individually. And project management doesn't per se solve the crisis. What it does instead is manage the complexity of the crisis, so you don't lose your mind. It takes the whole global catastrophe and turns it into a series of tickets that you can close down. Well, not exactly at the scale of the planet, but at the scale of your Tuesday. Hi, I'm Tina, and my background is both in research and in project management, both in relation to sustainability and climate change. And in my experience, your sense of overwhelm in light of the climate crisis doesn't mean that you're somehow not competent or efficient enough. When you look at it through a project management lens, it is actually a failure of scope. In project management, scope creep is when a project grows and grows until it collapses under its own weight. And if you think that you are personally responsible for the ice caps and the rainforests and the plastic in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, well, congratulations, your project has just failed. So the first step to staying sane and getting effective isn't exactly saving the world. It is giving yourself permission to de-scope. It is moving from how do I fix this to what is actually in the sphere of my own influence. So this is really about setting boundaries. And in project management, you would be doing this with your project charter. And the project charter is like a border wall for your brain if you want. What is important here is not to focus on what the world needs. Not quite yet anyway. The important first step is figuring out what you can realistically carry without joining a cult or moving to a cave. And that could mean that your scope is just, how do I move? Like, what are your means of transport? What can you decide on? What do you have influence on in that way? Or how do I heat my home? What options do you have in terms of energy provider or fuel sources? And it could be as simple as, what do I eat? And I'm not going to force you to go vegan here. I'm just saying, be mindful of what you eat. And that's it. That could be your scope. You don't have to start massive. You could start with transport, heating and food. That's your scope. Everything else, out of scope. Not your department. And once the boundary is set, the problem becomes finite. And finite problems are the only ones that we as humans are actually good at solving. So what else can we do? With the boundaries set, let's talk about the second source of doom, our to-do list of infinite guilt. Recycle the mail, stop using straws, buy an EV, compost the cat. Vote, it's exhausting. But through a project management lens, not all tasks are equal. Some are veritably high impact, but most are just technical debt. Stuff that makes you feel busy but doesn't move the needle. And again, for keeping sane and effective, stop trying to do everything. Instead, what you can do is write a backlog. Write down every eco-habit that you've come across and that you've been told to care about. And then stop using guilt as your filter. And then start using ROI, in this case meaning return on impact. And this can make you super effective. Changing your bank or your energy provider takes 1 hour or so and does more than a decade of diligent plastic sorting. So the message here is, focus on the leverage, ignore the noise. How else can project management help us deal with the climate crisis? So next, let's talk about timescales, because climate change is a 50-year roadmap. Probably longer. Humans, well, we are built for 2-week panics. We struggle with forever. So, instead of trying to change your life, you put on your project manager hat and you start running sprints. You just pick one theme. Maybe it is the low-waste bathroom sprint. And then you give yourself 2 weeks to research and try it out and fail and implement. And when the 2 weeks are up, you stop. You don't keep trying and grinding and hustling, you move on. You move that change into maintenance mode. You have a drink and you get some rest. And that is because we're looking for sustainable velocity, not a one-time suicide mission. And that brings us to the next point. In any professional project, burnout is listed as a high probability risk. But in climate work, we call it eco-anxiety. Let's be mindful. You are the only human resource this project has. If you burn out, the project ends, and we don't want that. So taking a break isn't quitting, it's resource leveling. Part of your project plan must be managing your own energy. After all, you are crucial to your own success. Figure out what's getting to you. Is it a news cycle? Then initiate a system shutdown for news. Again, sustainability has to include you, or it isn't sustainable. So what is the deeper meaning of looking at climate change like a project manager would? Well, it's a change of perspective, really. If you switch to a project management lens, that does change the overall question. Instead of asking, is this enough to save the world? Am I doing enough? Which really are questions that lead to a glass of wine and a cry in the dark. You can ask, is this in my scope? And can I complete the sprint? And these are questions that you can answer. And answering them is where agency lies. And agency is really the prime objective here. It may not always feel that way, but the goal has never been for any one of us to solve the climate crisis on our own. The goal is to stop freezing in the headlights or feeling confused or conflicted or gaslit. Agency doesn't really come from being a martyr, and climate action does not need you to sacrifice yourself or your well-being or your happiness. And what I'm trying to say in this video is that agency can come from being a competent manager of the small corner of the world you actually control, where you set your own personal boundaries and implement them per your own definitions and without burning out. And then you rest and then you do it again, rinse and repeat, building agency over and over. So stay grounded, move iteratively. And if you're trying to build a climate backlog but don't know where to start, I've opened up a few advisory sessions to help you manage your scope. And you can find a link to those in the description. And for now, let's get to work, one sprint at a time. See you again soon.